So when you came here, was your goal to play in shows like Hello Dolly, or was it more like I want to play at the knitting factory? I'm just kidding.
Well, you know what, Clay, this is crazy because I didn't want to tour or do anything. My goal, I wanted to be a studio musician. So I worked on my reading and worked on my timing because I wanted to be one of those guys where, okay, I'm going to finish this session and then I'm going to go to the next session and go to the next session and maybe play a club at night. That was my initial goal. But, I tell people that I was on the 8:00 bus for New York and the drum machine was on the 7:00 bus.
Thank you for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast with your host, Clayton Craddock. If you like what you hear on this show and you want to know more, subscribe to Broadway Drumming 101 at BroadwayDrumming101.com.
Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My guest today is the black belt of drumming. I brought that up because Mr. Damon DueWhite is not only a badass drummer, but you don't want to mess with him, dude. He's a black belt. He's a great person, too. Welcome to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast.
And thank you for having me. And before we start, Clayton, I'd like to thank you because I can only imagine the amount of work that goes into doing this. And I thank you for this, and I thank you for having me. I really do.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad we can catch up. It's been a long time since I've seen you in person, and long time since we've hung out and chatted. But
right,
we can talk music, we can talk martial arts, and we're going to talk about drumming. But I think we're going to talk about musical theater here, since that's the focus of my podcast. But I want to just talk about you. Going back to when you were a little child, what was your first musical memory?
Well, my first musical memory was my dad. My dad played. He was like a weekend warrior. He worked a job, but he played gigs on the weekend, and the bands rehearsed at our house.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That was in New York City?
No. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in a suburb. I'm not even going to call it a suburb. It was more rural than anything, outside of Philadelphia. I grew up. It was about 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia, and you would think you were in Kentucky. Like, honestly, it was like that. It was a place called Twin Oaks, Pennsylvania, near Westchester, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, and that's where I grew up. And so my dad, he gigged in and around the Philadelphia area. He was a bad dude.
What did he play?
His thing was like swing. It was like jazz, small combo jazz, A-Train and, all of that. And he played, it was like an organ quartet, sometimes a quintet. That was one of the bands that he played in. And as a matter of fact, that 1964 Ludwig kit in the corner,
that was his?
That was the kit that I started on.
Wow. And you still have it. Do you play on it?
No, it does not leave the house.
Oh, really?
No, I mean it's a collector's item. It was the Ringo. It was the kit that Ringo played.
Oh, wow.
And so back then, everybody was buying those kits. And, for my dad, my dad back then, that was a lot of money that he spent on that kit.
You watched your father play. Did he teach you lessons?
No, it was weird. No, it was weird. I was very young. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And my dad, because of the money that he spent on that kit, he said to me, I better not see you play my drums. But when he wasn't there, my mother would let me play because her thing was, if I hear you, I don't have to watch you. She and you know, she was like a housewife. She knew where I was as long as she heard the drums.
Why didn't your father want you to play?
Because he spent a lot of money on that drum kit.
He didn't discourage you from playing drums as a profession, or did he?
Well, this is the rest of the story. The signal from my mother was, your father's coming, get off the drums. And this one day, she didn't give me the signal, so I was playing and I looked up and he was standing in the doorway.
Okay.
Clayton, I got to say this. Thank God that the seat had it wasn't fabric. It was like that fake leather thing, because I peed on myself when I saw it.
Wow.
He said to me, I thought I told you, not to mess with my drums. And I'm like, oh. How long have you been doing this? I'm like, ah. So he said to me, and so he was standing there for a while. So he said, okay, do you want to play? So I said, yeah, I'd like to play. So he said, okay, if you want to play, you have to take lessons and you have to learn how to read. I didn't know what he meant by that, but what it was is there were a lot of gigs that he could not do because he couldn't read. You know what I mean? So he wanted me to be able to do gigs that required reading. So in answer to your question, I never formally studied with him, but I got a lot of what he had. I got, some of the great qualities that he had in playing just from watching him. And then eventually, as I had gotten older, I picked up little tips, but then he had stopped playing, after a while. You know what I mean? And
he still didn't lie to play that drum set.
No. Once he saw how I played, and then I was allowed to play the drums. You know what I mean? He let me play the drums. And actually, my first gigs were with those drums. He allowed me to take those drums out,
And who did you play with? Did you play with people in your neighborhood, people in Philadelphia?
Yeah, it was just a local. My first gig was with a local band, and they were. It was like a doo-wop band, like they did the OJs and all of that kind of stuff, stuff like that. So we played in and around the Philadelphia area with that band.
Were there other drummers other than your father that you idolized or that you looked up to at the time?
Well, at that time, this was all new to me. This was all new, like being in a band. I mean, because from the time that I started taking lessons at like 10 years old, and then I stopped because I started taking karate. And I hadn't played in a while. And then I got a call from this band. A friend of mine, a bass player, told these people to call me. And I was like, I hadn't played in years. My dad actually took me to the audition. And I went and I got the gig. So as far as other drummers in the area that I looked up to, up until that point, I wasn't even interested in playing music. But that band, once I had gotten into that band, we backed up a singing group, but the guys in the band, I was like, man, what are these guys doing? Like, before the singers would come, they were playing like Return to Forever, Mahavishnu Orchestra, stuff that like I said, I had no idea what it was. But all I know was that I had never seen anybody play that fast, play that many notes or this and that. And I'm like, man, what is this? What are they doing? And so they just sparked my interest. And then so through those guys, I just became more and more interested in music and wanting to get better. So I was about 15 then at that time,
What were you listening to as a 15-year-old teenager at the time? Were you listening to a lot of radio? Were you listening to a lot of people in your neighborhood? What was the musical world like at that time?
Yeah, we had a great radio station. First, we had two great radio stations out of Temple University. We had the jazz station WRTI, and then we had the serious R&B station WDAS. You know what I mean? That was and they had been around like since the 60s, coming out of Philly. So I had that, but there was always music in the house. Like my dad even though at that time he had stopped playing, we had jazz playing, and my mother, she had the gospel playing. And few years prior to that, my brother had come home from Vietnam, and he had brought home all of this killing stereo equipment. He was into Sly and the Family Stone, War, Chicago. He had turned me on to all that music. So there was always music in the house. So it was like, I didn't consciously listen to music. Like, I didn't wake up saying, okay, I'm going to listen to it. But it was just always there. And I was just absorbing it all the time, unconsciously, just always absorbing the music. And that's how, and like I said, I still wasn't serious. I still, I didn't know that was what I wanted to do.
Well, when did you figure out that you wanted to go to school for music, or you wanted to be a professional musician?
Well, that band that I was in, after about a year, they brought in a sax player, and this guy, I was like, oh my God, he had just gotten off the road with Gil Scott-Heron. And I said, man, where did you study? And he said, I studied at Berklee, Berklee College of Music. And I went home that night and said to my parents, I want to go to Berklee. When I heard this guy, I was like, man, I want to go to Berklee. And my parents were like, okay, all right, cool, And I think that was the point when I said, man, I want to do this. I really, really want to do this.
So you went to Berklee.
Yeah.
Usually, I hear stories of when people go to Berklee, they stay for a year, 2 years, then they leave and they go on tour. Did that happen to you, or did you stay and get your degree? And
I left. But the time that I spent there, man, I'm just going to say this. It's been a while since they've had that heavily concentrated group of musicians. When I got there, it was Terry Lynn Carrington, Cindy Blackman, Marvin Smitty Smith, Jeff Tane Watts, Billy Kilson, Tommy Campbell. That was just a few of the musicians that were there. Branford Marsalis, Donald Harrison, Greg Osby, Cyrus Chestnut, who went on to play with Wynton Marsalis, Rachelle Ferrell, Kevin Eubanks.
Wait, these were all people that were students at the time, or they were faculty?
They were students, former students. Like Kevin Eubanks, he had left school, but he stayed in Boston. The same with Tommy Campbell. So all of these people were there when I got there. In answer to your question, like, everybody stayed for a while and then they left. I got so much from that short period of time that I was there from them that it was amazing.
You left there to go on tour with Roberta Flack?
No. I went on tour. It was like it was this band. They did like lounges and casinos and stuff. And so we went traveling and this and that. And then after that, that's when I moved to New York, like in 1982. My first gig in New York was Johnny Copeland, blues singer.
Do you remember where you played? What venue it was?
It was a place called the Lone Star Cafe. That was one of the venues that we played here in New York. It was Lone Star Cafe because it was like a pretty popular spot. And Johnny, Johnny was pretty well known, and like I said, my first trip to Europe was with him, the Bern International Jazz Festival or something like that. That was my first gig.
So when you came here, was your goal to play in shows like Hello Dolly, or was it more like I want to play at the Knitting Factory? I'm just kidding.
Well, you know, Clay, this is crazy because I didn't want to tour or do anything. My goal, I wanted to be a studio musician. So I worked on my reading and worked on my timing because I wanted to be one of those guys where, okay, I'm going to finish this session and then I'm going to go to the next session and go to the next session and maybe play a club at night or this or that. So that was my initial goal. But, I tell people that I was on the 8:00 bus for New York, and the drum machine was on the 7:00 bus. So, once I got a lot of those studio gigs, it kind of gone away because of automation and all, and all that, because of the drum machine thing,
So when you saw that, drum machine was on the 7:00 bus and you arrived and the drum machine was taking up all the work, how did you view, your potential career in New York City at the time?
Well, it went from me wanting to be a session musician to playing in clubs, because the clubs were still around. It wasn't like the club scene had totally dried up. There was still some great, Lush Life, Sweet Basils. And I was into like the R&B, the blues thing. So there was a club called Mondo Connie.
I remember that.
Right. Clubs like that.
Manny's Car Wash.
That was the club.
Yeah.
That was the other club that I played at with Johnny. And then uptown, it was a club called, oh my God.
Mikkel's?
There you go.
Yes.
Mikkel's and all of those clubs. So they were still here. So I was able to gig, in the clubs. You know what I mean? And the session thing, I just had to put that, aside for a minute.
You were here in the early 80s.
Yes.
I grew up in Connecticut and went to Howard in the mid 80s and viewed hip hop from afar. This has nothing to do with Broadway, by the way, but it kind of does, because if you know Run DMC, if you know the Cold Crush Brothers, if you know Rakim, if you know KRS-One, and you know Tribe Called Quest, then you will know Hamilton. So put that out there. But anyway, when I was growing up, I would listen, and I was so captivated by rap music of New York. And from 1979, in my opinion, to like 1994, New York was the epicenter of rap music. Mm-hmm. Were you as enthralled as I was with rap music, knowing that, in the mid 80s, it was pretty much all drum machines? Were you into the music at all since you were here and you were involved in New York City nightlife and culture, or that wasn't your thing?
No, and it wasn't, and I'm going to say it was unfortunate, because I tried to stay away from it, because I'm coming from Berklee, and like I said, I mentioned all of the people that were at Berklee when I was there. So my thing was, now I'm trying to play jazz. I'm trying to venture off into that. And the reason why I say it's unfortunate that I didn't listen to that music at the time, because when I started listening to it, I guess like 10 years ago, I was like, oh my God, this is especially hip hop music of the 90s, because it fused the R&B, which was the music I grew up on, but I just shied away from it. And I was like, I hate to say this, but I was like becoming like a jazz purist and really couldn't play jazz. But I had that kind of like elitist mindset. That's drum machine, and I'm a musician and this and that. And that's why I said it was so unfortunate, man, because when I went back to listen to that music, I was like, man, this is killing. This is really, really killing. So I wasn't really into it like that at the time.
You wound up going on tour with Roberta Flack in the early 80s. Tell me about how you got connected to Roberta and what that situation was like.
I don't remember. I really don't. But I do know this because of that gig, the people that I met, and that. So the people on these gigs, the connections you make, I knew that was an amazing thing. But I'm serious. I honestly, I don't remember. Wow, that's bad.
Well, you wound up playing with a whole bunch of people during your years here,
Yes.
Bugnon and Shamika Copeland. Vernon Reid, he was, I'm sure he was doing a lot of similar kind of gigs before Living Color. Were you doing stuff before Living Color came out, or was it?
It was kind of after, and let me clarify this. When I on my bio it says Vernon Reid, it was actually Vernon Reid and I were on a gig together. Somebody had hired.
You saw Vernon. Hey, hey,
man, and he was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, who's that? You know what I mean? So that's why I played with Vernon Reid, because I actually did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So in the 80s, you're working with various artists in New York City. The 90s come around. Did you have any inkling of doing Broadway at all? What was your introduction to Broadway?
Going back to Roberta, because of the gig with Roberta, I met Zane Mark. And I know you're familiar with that name. Yes, Zane has written and done things for so many Broadway shows, it's kind of hard to count. But he asked me, did I want to go on the road and do Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk? So that was my first, but that wasn't until 97. In the 90s, early 90s, I was playing with Hugh Masekela.
Oh, wow.
I was doing him and Miriam Makeba. And then apartheid ended. For people that aren't familiar with Hugh, South African artist, but he was in a self-imposed exile because he left South Africa in the early 60s. He was being sponsored by Harry Belafonte. But anyway, he was so outspoken about apartheid, he could not go back home.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Right. He could not go back home because they had threatened to kill him.
Damn.
So in 1990, Mandela is released and apartheid supposedly is abolished. He goes back home and I do my first tour ever. It's his first tour in 30 years, a homecoming tour with him. So then the Broadway thing came after that. It came after that with Zane asking me to go on the road and do Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk.
So how'd you connect with Zane?
From
Roberta.
Roberta. Zane was like the associate conductor. He was really the MD. They had an MD, but he was really the MD for Roberta. And Zane remembered me, and when this came up, he asked me to do Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk.
Did you ever get a chance to see the show on Broadway? Did you sub there at all?
No. I just, I went in to observe. I didn't get a chance to sub, but I went in to observe. I sat in the pit and all of that.
So from what I understand from that show, I saw it, I think, one time on Broadway. They, there's a drummer in the pit, but there were also bucket drummers, correct?
The bucket drummers, yes.
Did you do any of that, or was it mostly just...
No, I was strictly on the kit. Strictly on the kit. Because that was, they did period pieces. They did decades, music in different decades. And then at the end of it was like the hip-hop thing, and they brought out the buckets. But we were still in the pit. You know what I mean?
Did you ever get a chance to play on the buckets, or were you like, nah, you guys...
Dude, I tried it, and I was like, you know what? Y'all got it. Because I'm serious, man. There is an art to doing that. Oh, my God. And these guys, but the drag was with them, these guys could also play on the kit.
Mm.
Yeah. Few of these guys could play the kit. And I was like, don't come anywhere near these drums.
Because you will break the heads.
Right, making me feel bad. No, showing me, what I mean? So
it was a pretty, I guess, long tour, a little bit over a year.
Initially, it was supposed to be a year, and then it got extended, and we did 2 years.
And where'd you go?
Just in the States, but everywhere. Mm. Because what happened was, the first year, you do, the primary cities or whatever, for lack of a better term. And, you're a month in one city or 6 weeks and this and that. And then the second go round, the second year that we went, the length of time that you were in these cities, it's a little shorter. But then you're doing more theaters because some of the, smaller venues or whatever, you start doing those.
So how did you stay sane playing the same show, pretty much the same way every single night for over a year?
It's a gig, and I got to go back to my dad, man. He was my superhero. My dad dug ditches at one time. At one time, he ended up being like, in a managerial position. But, I'm like, if he could do that, I'm going to complain about coming here.
Playing drums.
Right.
Thing that I love to do.
Right, for like 2 hours. So that's what would help me to keep my focus. And then the other thing too about being on the road, I didn't, I was younger then, I didn't mind it because it was kind of like once you get into a city, it's kind of relaxing. It's kind of chill because you're not moving around. And we had apartments. You go to the theater, you do the gig, and then, I'm a gym rat. So, I get up in the morning, I work out, do whatever. It was great. It was really, it was fine for me, So.
You get back into New York. Do you wind up being part of the theater scene? Did you go out on another tour? Like, you're like, man, I kind of like this gig. Or did you get back into playing in clubs?
I mean, I got back, eventually, you get back into playing the clubs because people forget about you because you're, out of sight, out of mind, so eventually I got back into the club thing. And this was, it was like this. No, it wasn't. No, I'm wrong. Yes. So I got back into the club thing for a while after a while. Yeah.
The next show I think you did was It Ain't Nothing But the Blues.
Ain't Nothing But the Blues. And we did, little small regional theaters. And this was my claim to fame on that. I was working with Gregory Porter.
Oh, wow.
Yes, before he became Gregory Porter.
Great singer.
Yes. So it was that. And that lasted, I think, about a year. And then after that, I got the call with Shamika Copeland.
Tell me about your experience subbing for Buddy Williams at the Color Purple.
Just saying that, subbing for Buddy Williams, just... I got to say this. I mean, Buddy, like going back to when you asked me when did I decide that I wanted to do this for a living. Back then, Clayton, we had albums and you could look on the albums and see who was playing. And it was crazy because the songs that I gravitated to, of course, you're looking who's on it. And that name kept coming up. Buddy Williams, it was like Buddy Williams, Harvey Mason, Steve Gadd, those cats. And so because of Roberta, because of what Buddy had heard about me on the Roberta gig. And one of the things that Buddy had said he admired, I could play soft. He liked the fact that I could play, because he had seen me on a gig. So fast forward to what you were saying about subbing for Buddy, just that alone was nerve-wracking because I gotta go in. I have to go in for Buddy. So Color Purple, it was one of my, I gotta say, it was one of my more challenging gigs because I had to also play percussion.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The djembe, right? Didn't it?
Yes,
wasn't it a djembe thing?
Djembe. Yes, that's true.
For me, that was one of the most challenging shows for me because of that, and switching and all of that, But like anything else, once you get it under your belt, it's fine. And it was a great show, just the storyline and the performances, and everybody, just that show in and of itself was just an amazing show, to be a part of.
When you get involved in theater, you meet a lot of different musicians. Yeah. And there are things that stem from your maybe subbing experience or working with somebody like Zane Mark. And there was a show that he was involved with called Holler If You Hear Me. I understand you were a part of the show before it went to Broadway. Is that how things went down?
Yeah, Zane. Yeah, I mean, I think it was maybe 2 years before it had even gotten to Broadway. We started doing workshops. We started doing the workshops. The first workshop was to spark the interest of the show, and then a year later, the next workshop is to get first year was to get investors. The next year was to find a theater. They had the investors, and so that was like a year and a half, whatever process before the show had even gotten to Broadway.
Did you wind up doing the show as well?
Yeah, but the thing was, we were once we finally got the green light, we had rehearsed for 2 months, and I think the rehearsals lasted longer than the show.
Really?
Yeah, the show it didn't last that long.
I remember seeing it it was at that theater on 47th Street.
Ambassador.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't last that long, and I don't know. I'm not privy to the information that comes through those channels, but I don't know why it didn't last, but it didn't. What I mean? It was a great experience because it was Carl, like you said, the musicians. It was a great experience because of the cats that you get to play with. And going back to, I think, what we were saying prior to when you started recording, the vibe of the pit. We just had so much fun. It was we had such a great time. And it was funny because there's this old adage, and I don't know if it still holds true today, but they were like, if you're having fun in the pit, if you like the musicians in the pit and you like the music, the show's not going to last. And that was the case with this show. We had a great time. We really had a great time in the pit. You know what I mean?
So how did you marry the fact that you're playing drums in a Broadway show to music that was made with the drum machine that got to New York at 7 a.m. and you got here at 8?
I was playing V drums for one thing. And so we went through the process of programming the kit to match as closely as we could to match what was happening on the records. You know what I mean? So that's how that happened, which V drums which I hate to play.
Learning a show. Tell people what you do and what works best, in your opinion, to sub for someone on a Broadway show.
I go in first to observe, and I ask for the audio, and I don't know if I can say this, but I get the conductor's video. Yeah, it's fine. And I start listening to the music, looking at the conductor's video. And what I do is when I listen through, I pinpoint for me what I consider the most difficult parts of the show. And in that, I mean like fast segues, or tempo changes, or, certain cues that I need to be aware of. And then once I go through those, and then I start running the show, looking at the conductor's video, and then also too, verbal cues and this and that. And I start, writing down notes for all of these cues. And then once I get to the point where I'm just practicing with the conductor's video, then it's like, okay, I'm doing the show. Like I'm at that point now where this is my final process for preparation, is to start playing along with the conductor's video, you know. And another thing too, what I do is I go in and take a photo of the drummer's setup, and I set my drums up as closely as I can to how they have their drums set up. And I practice like that.
Yeah, I find that to be very, very important, because when you get behind someone else's drum set, you're not allowed to change the angles of the toms or the cymbals. You can probably change the height of the snare and maybe the angle, but you have to be wary of that as well, because the angle has to be coordinated with the microphone that's on there.
Right. Exactly.
And then think about the chair height and how far it is from the bass drum and what kind of bass drum pedal somebody's using. Taking a picture of somebody's drum set and matching it to yours in a way that you can practice to it is very, very important.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I almost make it a conscious effort to not be comfortable when I'm practicing, because like you said, you're going in sitting at a kit that you cannot adjust. So, and that's what it is. So I need to start getting used to, and I don't want to say not getting comfortable, because in practicing, hopefully by the time I go in there, I'm comfortable, because I've practiced like that with my kit set up as close to what they have as possible. You know.
So Buddy said, you know, I like Damon for The Color Purple. I like Damon from Motown. So I said, I want you to come back to me again and sub for me at this the funkiest show ever. Hello, Dolly. How do you go from Holla If You Hear Me, Bringing the Noise, Motown, to Hello, Dolly? Tell me about, you know, I don't know anything really about Hello, Dolly. I've never seen the show. I don't know. I know the song Hello, Dolly. Is it like, you know, you driving down the street and you take the sharp right turn? Is it that different from anything you've ever done, or were you prepared to do something like that?
I mean, no. I mean, I was prepared because first of all, it's a gig, and you go in with the sole purpose of doing what's needed on the gig. And for me, it was great because it wasn't a challenging show. It wasn't like we were playing difficult beats. Unch, 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 unch. You know, and I had bills to pay. So,
when he calls, it's like, yes, I'll be there.
Right. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I'm like, okay. And that was one of the things Buddy said. He said the hardest part about this gig is staying awake.
Really? So tell me about the music for that show. I mean, is it mostly boom chick, or is it like big band stuff? Like what?
It wasn't like big band stuff because really the music was far less important for that show. To me, the music was far less important than any other show that I've done. And also too, in all of these shows, the music isn't the most important thing. It's always about what's happening on stage. So in this show, to me, the music was even far less important because it wasn't that crazy. It wasn't a whole lot of, it wasn't out front. It wasn't like Tina. It wasn't like playing Tina. You're basically a support, and you're basically just supporting the dialogue, supporting what's going on stage. So it really wasn't a big deal. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't hard at all.
So there was no stomping on the stage by Bette Midler saying, "What's going on downstairs? Why isn't this right?" Or it wasn't a pressure-filled environment knowing that she's upstairs?
Well, you know what, Clayton, I got to tell you this though. And you know what? I want to say this because I want people to know that it's not all peaches and cream. When I first went in, I played for the main conductor. And it was funny. He was like, there's something that I'm not doing. And it was driving him nuts. It was driving him nuts. Couldn't figure out what it was. So he said, like, I don't know what it is. He said, but Bet is not going to like it. So he said in the beginning, you cannot play the show for Bet, but I could play for her understudy.
Yeah.
So then he brought in, are you familiar with Justin Hornbeck?
I know the name.
Conductor. Great guy, amazing guy who's also a drummer, percussionist.
Mm.
He came in and knew immediately what was happening. There was a section of the music where I was supposed to be playing 16ths. I was playing eighth notes. Mm. And the main conductor couldn't figure out what it was. And so once that was cleared up, then I got the green light. I was good. You know what I mean? Wow. So Bet, so going back to what you were saying, no, Bet didn't stomp on the stage. They kind of saved me from that. I was kind of saved from that. So,
One interesting thing about subbing, the people on stage, they know what they want because they've heard it from the original drummer. And if you're, it's you can't simulate exactly what the principal drummer does, but there are certain things that they know that they like. And if it's 16th notes on a snare or a hi-hat, and with your case, you can play 16th notes on the bass drum at 180 beats per minute. But, they definitely can tell when they don't hear it, then something's wrong. And that's probably what the situation was.
No, and of course, and you have to appreciate that. I mean, they know what they want. And our job as subs is to come in and give them what they want. You know what I mean? Try to come as close to that as possible as you can. I mean, that's the nature of the beast, and you can't be mad at them for calling you out for not giving them what they want, or not saying calling you out, or not addressing the fact that you're not giving them what they want. You know what I mean? And it's up to you and them to work it out. Now, like I said, for that situation, the problem came when he wasn't sure exactly what it was that I wasn't giving him. And then he brought in Justin, and Justin cleared it up. And so it was all, it was fine after that. You know what I mean? It was good,
So when I got here in 1993, I would go to a lot of different clubs. I'd see you play. I'd see Rocky Bryant play. I'd see JoJo Meyer play. I'd see Gene Lake play. I'd see Nathaniel Townsley play. Some of my favorite drummers in New York, I just mentioned, and they're all, except for JoJo, he might be someplace else, but a lot of them are still around. But there's a guy that played on a song called New World Order. It was on an album by a group called The Family Stand in 1991. And this guy, Rocky Bryant, is killing on that song. Like, who the hell is this Rocky Bryant guy? It's like, God damn, is he good?
Yes.
And I've seen him play a number of times. And, these are the people that I'm like, I was just telling Damon before we got on this call that I've been looking at a lot of Dennis Chambers recently, and I forgot how great he was. And I looked at his solo. I'm like, those things where you watch somebody play and you're like, oh my God, I'll never be as good as him. It's either inspiring or, ego deflating. When I heard Rocky play, and I still see him play, he's such on a high level. I'm like, man. But then you realize, he gets hired to be the drummer for a show called Tina. I'm like, holy cow, this guy's going to be right across the street from me where I was at Ain't Too Proud. And not only did Buddy call you, Rocky Bryant called you to sub for him at Tina. Tell me how that connection started. Was it from way back in the day and you guys just knew each other? And
No, check this out. He didn't call me. No. You know what? I think the show had only been open for about a month, and I was doing a gig. I was at, as a matter of fact, it was the Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I was down there with Vivian Reed. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Tony nominated performer on Broadway, but the bassist at the time was Kenny Davis. I don't know if you're familiar with Kenny. So he said to me, man, Rocky, I don't know if you know it, but Rocky is doing Tina Turner and he's looking for subs. So I said, okay. And I hadn't spoken to Rocky. Oh man, it must have been years. So I said, well, can you call him for me? I didn't want to, you haven't spoken to a person and all of a sudden, oh, hey man, I hear you doing Broadway. So I didn't feel right, doing that. So Kenny called him and it was so crazy. And I said to Kenny, ask him, does he remember me? And so Rocky, he called me, he's like, really? Yes, I remember you. So that was it, so he asked me to come down, and then that was it, that's how I got that gig.
So I hear at that show when it was open, there were a lot of costume changes, and you had to know certain choreography. And tell me what, was it? Obviously, you subbed at shows before. You had your own show for a minute. The biggest differences between subbing for like Hello Dolly or Motown or The Color Purple, as opposed to something where you're actually on stage and you're doing things. Tell me about that experience.
That was new. That was totally different because timing. Timing is everything. You have to run down at a certain time. And someone's there, with your jacket and with your pants, with your shoes. And then, you sit at the kit. They roll the kit out. They roll the kit back. You come off stage, you stand at a certain spot until someone moves. You hand this person the cymbal, then you run over here. The person is there with your pants, your new change of clothes. It was a lot. It was a lot. And then I had a little small acting part, which was very small. When
you had to take Ike off of Tina, like what?
Almost. It was almost that. He throws a cymbal at Tina.
Oh, damn.
He grabs my cymbal. I'm off stage. He grabs my cymbal and throws it at her. And then I come on. Everybody comes on stage. It's like, what's going on? And so then she picks up the cymbal, and I have to walk out and get it from her. And she's like apologetic, about my cymbal. And I have to give her a little nod, like, it's okay. And I grab the cymbal and I walk off. So
what? Oh man, I was just joking, but damn. Wait, so it's not a real cymbal, is it?
No. It's not the cymbal. And this is the thing too. I'm playing the real kit back behind the scrim up on the platform. On stage, I'm playing V drums.
Okay.
So they have the V drum cymbal, but then they have this one cymbal as a prop, which is the cymbal he uses to throw at Tina.
So he actually throws it?
He throws it, but it's like, it's like one of those, what's one of the cheapest cymbals, that you get? Yeah. He throws it, it hits the ground, like, how dare you or something, whatever, you bitch, Ike. It was Ike.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah.
I wish I had seen that show, man. I heard it was really, really good.
Oh, I mean, I have to say this. Of all the shows I've done, that was the one that was the most fun. As challenging as it was with the costume changes, once I had gotten that down and could really enjoy myself, that was one of the most fun shows that I had ever been on. Because we, we got to play. It was like a concert. We got to play the tunes in their entirety. Unlike Motown, like with Motown, those are songs I grew up on, just as you're getting to the good part.
Yep, I know.
So with Tina, it was like we got to rock out. It was just, oh man, it was great. It was great. It was great. So I really loved that show. That was my favorite.
So someone moves to New York, or somebody wants to move to New York and wants to play shows or become a successful musician like yourself. What's one thing that you'd recommend that they do?
Network. You have to get out there. You have to make yourself known. You have to make yourself known. It was a little different for me because, I was fortunate because going back to my Berklee days, man, the people, that group of people, those names that I mentioned, most of them moved to New York. So we all knew each other. So, we are all calling each other. So it was a little different, for me, but and Clayton, the scene has changed so much. I don't want to give people advice from my coming here because I don't want to give them the wrong advice because I'm not really sure how the scene is. Like, there aren't as many clubs as there were, and there aren't as many clubs now as there were back then. So I don't know how they go about making their connections, but that's one of the things that I would suggest. You try to make as many connections as possible. I know on one of your podcasts, you had mentioned something about having a YouTube channel, and putting yourself out there through that. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the ways of making yourself known, and getting your name out there.
If someone wants to become a black belt, what steps does one need to take? I'm kind of joking, but I admire your commitment to physical fitness. What's your secret to maintaining a healthy weight and a healthy lifestyle?
Just eating less. I realized that I have to eat less, and I, like when you remember when you sent me some of the questions that you said you would ask, mm-hmm. One of them was, what is one of the things that I'm promoting now? Mm-hmm. What I'm promoting right now, I'm trying to promote is a healthier way of life for my friends and my loved ones. You know what I mean? That's what I'm doing. And the reason being is because I've, past few years, I'm friends of mine and loved ones of mine are succumbing to illnesses and health issues that I know can easily be fixed with a minor change in your diet and a small amount of exercise and an annual checkup. You know what I mean? A lot of what they're going through can be prevented just with those few steps. You know what I mean? So for me, as far as maintaining, I've been going to the gym for 40 years. I've been working out for 40 years, but the last 10 years, I think I finally got it right, where I'm healthier. I was younger, so I was eating. I could eat anything and maintain a certain weight, but I was eating garbage. Now I'm eating better and maintaining that same weight, and I realized that I don't have to eat as much, to maintain this weight, So that's how I do it. I just don't eat as much as I thought I did. And then of course too, I'm working out, I'm working out like an hour and a half a day for 5 days a week or something like that. sometimes 2 hours.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And I tell people there's 3 levels of working out. The first level is just to improve your health. And that could be 30 minutes of walking. That's it. The next level is fitness. You want to be more fit. So you start, doing muscle toning and this and that. And then the next level is performance. You're working out because you're training for an event. You're training for a marathon, or you're training for football, or you're training for sport. That's the highest level. And it depends on your goal, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, my goal is to get back into my fly clothes, man. I'm sorry. I have a closet full of great stuff that I used to be able to wear. I'm getting back into it. I'm as determined to get back into those clothes as I was determined to be a successful musician in New York. And when I have that goal, I'm sorry, there's kind of no stopping me. I shouldn't say kind of. There is no stopping me.
Yeah.
And I also need to get back into the whole boxing thing because, man, that's incredible. That's incredible workout.
Yes,
man,
it is.
That hard.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But I tell people, just don't, number one, don't set your goals too high. Like you said, you want to get back into your clothes, but just start walking. I'm going to walk every day, 30 minutes. Seriously. And not like, like you're walking through the mall or you're walking with your lady and you're looking
at the windows like, oh, wow. Get out there and move.
Just walk. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. That's just start there. You know what I mean? That's my thing, So.
If people want to reach out to you, do you teach do you have a fitness program for people? And number one, do you also teach drum lessons? And number 3, what are the ways for people to actually reach out to you?
My email. That's the best way to reach me through email. Of course, I have people reaching out to me through Facebook, but those are my Facebook friends. Those are really, people I know. But I think the best way to reach me is through my email. And that's my name, Damon DueWhite@yahoo.com. All one word, And I'm on Instagram, I'm on Instagram also,
Do you do fitness programs for people? Do you
I do. I just started. I've done that, and then I kind of gotten back into it. There's a young lady. I don't know if people are familiar or you're familiar with a bassist named Reggie Workman. Mm-hmm. He was Miles and all of that. Well, his daughter, who's a cello player, her name is Nyoka Workman. She started an organization called 52 Arts Studio. And through her, she asked me that I want to start a fitness class, which was something I didn't think about before. So we're kind of trying to get that started. But if anyone wants to reach out to me, they can reach me through my email address.
And do you teach drum lessons?
I do. I have students, that I teach. Not a lot. I have maybe like 7 or 8 students. Okay.
Do you do any kind of martial art competition? Now, have you ever done that?
Oh, no, not at all. That black belt thing that you're talking about. I was 14 years old.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. But because of that sparked my interest in staying fit. That was the first sport that I ever did. So that was kind of the thing I haven't done any of that kind of stuff in a while. I box, I hit the bag and all that, but I play a lot of tennis now. I've been playing tennis for the last 20 years. So that's my thing. I train to be able to play tennis starting in the spring.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. there's music and then there's tennis for me. That's my That's my thing.
Fascinating. I never knew that.
Yeah. So,
you have a favorite tennis player out now?
Well, now my favorite tennis player, two of my favorite tennis players just retired. That's Serena Williams and Roger Federer. Because when I came in, I started playing 20 years ago. They were the ones. So for the last 20 years, it was wonderful. I was able to follow them. Since Roger and Serena, since they retired, and I was just weeping over that, I'm forcing myself to get familiar with the newer crop of tennis players that are coming up. That's one of the other things that I'm really obsessed about. Is playing tennis. I'm like crazy.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate you being a part of the podcast and telling me your story and hearing some insights about playing for shows and just life in general.
Yes, and listen, I'm telling you, I can't thank you enough. And like I said, I really, I see how much work you put into doing this. It's a lot. I know it's a lot, and I can tell because it's quality. You know what I mean? Because it's qualitative. So thank you again, man, and I appreciate you having me. And good to see you. You were like my neighbor, my next door neighbor, who's a great guy, and I see him twice a year. He's the greatest guy in the world.
I know, it's so weird, man. I used to walk by the theater like, wow, man. People I know, Alvin was there, Winston was there.
Yes.
And I'd see Winston come by. We cross paths from time to time. I worked with him a couple times years ago, but it's like,
yeah.
Great guy, man. Great player. Just cool.
Yeah. But listen, man, thank you so much. And we'll catch up, man.
Definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, right. Damon DueWhite. I'm going to have clapping after this. Thank you, man. We will talk soon.
Okay, all right. Good, man.
All right.
Thank you.
To continue producing the high-quality podcast you're listening to, publishing engaging newsletter content, and posting YouTube videos, we would appreciate any financial contributions you can make. At this time, we have no advertisers, and we'd like to keep it that way. Our staff is small but growing. We can only produce a show with listener contributions from people like you. There are a couple of ways you can do that. You can sign up to be a monthly or annual subscriber at BroadwayDrumming101.com. You can also contribute any amount you wish through PayPal at paypal.me/BroadwayDrumming101 or through Venmo at BroadwayDrumming101. Or help keep us caffeinated by buying us a cup of coffee or a week's worth at buymeacoffee.com/BD101. That's buymeacoffee.com/BD101. We appreciate any support you can give. Don't forget to subscribe to the Broadway Drumming 101 YouTube page. You'll find more content that isn't featured on the podcast or on the Broadway Drumming 101 Instagram page. Make sure when you subscribe to the YouTube page, you click on the button to be notified when a new video is published. Be sure to visit our new shop at merchandise.broadwaydrumming101.com. Thanks again for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast.